Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. As you can see, we are joined by two individuals here today. We have Jodi and her dog on the podcast again. And oh my God. And it's Halloween for anyone that she's not just dressing up her dog just for anything. It's Halloween, everyone. We're recording it on Halloween. This will be out in a few weeks afterwards. But yeah, we can see he's got the nice angel costume going. And yeah, we're just here to talk to Jodi and give us a little update on what she's been up to. And she made a post on Instagram that I thought was really interesting, and it was a great topic that I thought that we could get into. But before we get into all that, like I said, happy Halloween to everyone out there. And Jodi, thank you so much for coming back on.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Well, I ask this every single time I have a guest on. What is the weather like today?
It's very nice out. It's sunny. I think it's a balmy, in the 60s. It's very nice. We had a lot of pretty heavy winds over the past several days, so that seems to have calmed down. And so, yeah, it's very nice.
Yeah, it is about 50 degrees here, and it looks like it's going to get a little cooler, so it might be put a damper on some of the trick or treaters. But are you handing out candy tonight? We'll just get some of the Halloween questions out of the way first. Are you handing out candy tonight? What's the plan?
No, I mean I live in an apartment complex, and so while there are some young kids that live like across the hall from me, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not gonna buy a whole bunch of candy and then not. I'm not gonna be eating it,
I
and
was gonna say
then
that's just torture if you just have it just sitting around basically, and you're just like, okay,
yeah,
what do I do with this? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and then I'm not gonna be that one. My mom was that one who gave out raisins and popcorn. That was my.
Hopefully, she's still paying for that some way, like somehow, like there's like some karma that's coming at her or something like that for that.
I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, there was that one lady on our block too that gave out apples. She was a dentist, and it was like, come on, like there's a
I
time and place.
Yeah, I do have one Halloween story. So one year she did give out the it was the double bubble gum. So you know that really sweet bubble gum, and basically you chew it like three chews and the flavor's gone. But they were the individually wrapped. So one Halloween, she wasn't watching. I was really young. And I we had two German shepherds at the time, and I unwrapped, it must have been like 60 pieces of bubble gum, and I unwrapped each and fed them to the dogs. That was, yeah, I was doing a good deed.
Their poor bladders, good God.
And all the vet just said, all you can do is just wait until they, they pass it through. So, yeah, that was.
Which actually, everyone who always says it's that myth of like if you swallow gum, it comes out like 7 or 9 years later, whatever. It's a myth. Everyone, first of all, I've done my research on it when I was a kid. I figured out, I was like, wait, that's not actually true, because I was like, yeah, obviously it won't stay in your system for 7 to 8, 9 years or whatever like that. But yeah, that's great. And yeah, Halloween, yeah, it's always special time of year for me. But my family has been Grinches, since. Well, so I have a younger brother and an older brother, and ever since we were basically got into our 20s and stuff like that, where we didn't want to hand out candy either, we just basically, well, there's going to be, I'm a Vikings fan, as everyone knows that, and they play the Cowboys tonight, Sunday Night Football. So we'll be downstairs. We'll have all the lights turned off upstairs, and then we'll have downstairs in our TV room. We'll have the lights turned on down there and watching the game. So, yeah, anyone, if you want to egg our house or TP our house, go for it, because we deserve it for doing that. But before we get into all that, I mean, Jodi, you made a really great post about how and I think it applies to just more than just you, with a lot of people that get done with the sport of bodybuilding, where you sort of figure out, like, what do you do now? That's one thing that I figured out with baseball, where because of injuries, I wasn't able to pursue it, my dream in college and maybe in pro sports after that. I had a rough time sort of figuring out what to do next. What is that whole mindset sort of been like for you? Because I mean, you've made posts about it, and it's just something that I think you really care about. And it's something that I think a lot of people need to hear, because there is a life after bodybuilding, which is what most fans I think wouldn't really get, is they're like, oh, they actually do stuff afterwards. And it's a funny observation for me, at least.
Well, I just think what makes bodybuilding very different from so many other things is how much it takes over your life, and how it affects how you perceive yourself, how you choose, and what you want for how you look. So there's these other elements that come into play than just like, oh, what do I do with my time now? But actually, where um, you're typically not going to hold on to that particular size or that level of conditioning, dependent upon your genetics, of course. But then again, for me, I want to look a certain way still. I just don't want to compete. I still be, and a lot of people say, "Are you still working out? It looks like you're still working out." Yeah, I was working out for 8 years before I ever even began dieting for a show. So this was a part of my life, and it's not that I don't like the gym. I just made some decisions with the direction that I saw women's physique going in. It just was this decision that happened over time, and it just kind of snuck in. I think it was sneaking in even while I was competing. Um, and once I was able to stop, I was able to go, "Oh, I didn't really want this for my body, and I don't want to push my body in the direction that is being rewarded in the division. That's not for me. It's not why I got into this division. Um, and I don't want the health risks either for what I'm going to have to either continue doing or do in addition in order to play the rat race, that the division had become, and try to keep up with what the other girls were doing to in pushing the boundary lines of the division. And for me, I I think for people who um their world is tied, like their personal world is also tied, or their professional world is also tied to um bodybuilding or fitness. I think it's an easy transition. I say easy, but I do actually think it's an easy transition of, well, you're still like, everything about you is still infused in the industry, so it's just a matter of um you're just switching. If we look at it like bookshelf, you're just switching to a different shelf of the same thing. It's just maybe you not going on stage, but maybe you're putting more time in helping others to go on stage, or some aspect of it. But me, when I got into personal training, it was meant to just be this little pit stop along the way of doing other things in my life, except that I got a little lost. And that is something that I think bodybuilding does, that you end up with these blinders on and you get into this like, I'm going down this lane and I need to follow this lane all the way to see how far I can go and see, and get to where I think I want to go. And then for me, it was like I got as far as I was going to go, and I was like, oh, I never meant to go here. That wasn't the point. I mean, and one of the things was that I had made a decision. So let me back up. Um, I had been working in nonprofit education. I was an instructional leader for our site, and running a staff of educators, and where we were working with brand new teachers on their road to becoming certified in the state. And I could have moved states and taken over another site in another state. Our private funding had been pulled. The organization had decided to change all of the private funding to making it public funding. And Texas at the time had over 180 alternative certification programs. And even though we had a very unique setup, and one that was worked very well, and that the districts were happy with, districts were in Texas were not going to pay for an alternative certification program to feed them teachers when they already had other options. And so all the sites in Texas had to close down, and we were actually the most successful. My teachers that I oversaw had the um, highest scores on their observations and their whole everything in the whole nation. we were tied with Austin. So our two sites were the best, and we were closed down. And I was working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. In nonprofit, you do. And I was pretty burned out. I was really stressed. I had been competing throughout a lot of that time that I worked there. And I was concerned about going. I could have gone into another, moved states and made a little more money and taken on even more responsibility and continued along that route. And I just sat there and thought, well, I've always wanted to go back to school and get my master's in writing. And I'm worried. First of all, I don't want to leave the bodybuilding community that I have here. I don't know, like, what coach am I going to work with? What are the gyms there? How am I going to have enough time? So bodybuilding was definitely like this piece that always fed into every single decision I made. Of, well, if I leave, then I leave all of this other stuff that I really need for this portion of my life that I thought was a permanent fixture. And I decided to turn down that opportunity and to instead take on something like personal training um, and so that I would have the flexibility to be able to apply to schools and go to graduate school. So, except that then I started doing well in competitions. I won the Miss Natural Olympia in, let's see, the Miss Natural Olympia. I won that. I actually won that while I was in I was still a nonprofit. So I had switched back to the NPC. So in 2013, I switched back to the NPC and requalified for the national level. And I started in women's physique, and I started kind of that roller coaster again. Like, the engine started going again, and I was able to do better and better at the shows. In 2015, I did turn pro. And so, of course, when you're doing better on the stage, then people want to work with you because they attribute, oh, you do well on the stage, then, you must be able to tell me what to do so I can do well on the stage, which has some merits, but is not always true. And I definitely knew what to help people with. And posing coaching, I know my stuff. And so I was like, well, I'm going to build my business. I'm going to focus on that, and in the competitions, and then I'm just and I eventually I'll apply to graduate school. And I kept pushing it off and pushing it off. And there were just some things that had happened, and I had to sit there and ask myself, if I never make it to the Olympia and I die and I'm on my deathbed, will I regret that? And it was a hard, fast no. It was never a dream of mine. I know there are people out there that is like their dream, and they put everything into it and go gung ho for it. And that's great. If you do that, that's your choice. For me, my whole goal was to turn pro in the IFBB, to stand on a pro stage in the IFBB and look like I belong, and just even do it once. So I surpassed that goal. I mean, I had almost qualified for the Olympia. I know, almost. But I was 1 point away from qualifying for the Olympia in 2016. I've placed second, I've placed third, I've placed fifth, I've placed sixth at the pro level. I have surpassed my goal. And I only wanted to stand on the Olympia stage because that is what the traffic put. If you're in a crowd at a concert and the crowd is going this way, it's real hard to step away and go to a different spot. So you end up finding yourself moving with the crowd. Maybe you meant to go to the restroom, but actually everybody's going up towards the stage, and you're like, I don't want to do that. I need to go over here. And there was something that just clicked in me that it was like, the thing I will regret is having not applied to graduate school and made that happen. That I will regret. And so I did it. I applied and I got into my first choice school. I was rejected by two other schools, but sir, come on. I'm sorry. Uh, Look, this is not helpful. Um, he does this when I'm teaching too. So I I applied and I got in, and I was very, very excited. I remember that day. And um, I then made a goal that during my, everybody was like, oh, you're not going to be able to compete because you're going to be going to school. And it was like, no, I'm going to compete. And I had this thought of, I really wanted to show that I could do it, that I could compete, I could prep, and I could go to school, and I could run my business. And I think that's something that a lot of us are type A personalities, and we do it all, do everything, and take on too much. And what ended up happening during that year, during my second semester, was that Roxy died. My dog, my first dog. And I'm not married and I don't have kids. I've explained that before on here. So when people are like, "Oh, that's sad, her dog died," but but it's no, that was my um she was basically my child. I just didn't give.
I mean, they're family members. Let's be honest. I mean, even for I mean, yeah, dogs. Losing my dog was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do when we lost our first dog. Yeah, it's incredibly painful. Even, and I can't even imagine what it's like for you then too, because that you and your dogs have such a close bond. It's yeah.
And she died 10 days before I was competing in 2018. And so I was in graduate school. I had ended up doing two shows that year. I did the Arizona again, which didn't pan out that well, but then I did the Legion Sports and I got 6 out of 30 women. It was a different sort of lineup and a little more reminiscent of what the earlier stages of women's physique was. So it was one of the reasons why I did do better. Um, but there was just something that happened after that. That first of all, in the off season, so at the Legion Sports, I had two male judges who, when I went down to talk to them for feedback, two male judges just instantly said, "You're shaped like a square." There was nothing else. There was no like, "We really like this about your physique. Here's the thing. Here's where you can add here." It was, both of them had said, "You're." One said, you have no shape. You're built like a box," and another one said, "You're shaped like a square." And I've learned my lesson of talking back to judges. I did that early on as an amateur, and I don't recommend that. um, and I just looked at him and smiled and said, "Okay, thank you." And one of them said, "But maybe I don't know, but talk to Sandy," and which I was wanting to do anyways. But I like to hear some different opinions. And so then when I talked with Sandy, the head judge, she did not say I was shaped like a square. What she did say was,
What if she had said that though? That would, yeah, Jody, they're right. You are shaped like a Swiss.
I might have, because I've talked with Sandy a lot throughout the years, I might have said, exactly what do you mean by that? Could you qualify that with something that actually relates to helpful advice for the gym? That I would have said. The other two, I did not know those judges very well. In fact, one of the judges, I don't think I've ever stood in front of him before. So I just wasn't, it was just thank you. And, but Sandy gave me, which Sandy always does, give constructive critiques. And she just said, you need a little more width in your back. And I said, okay. So, that I am narrow. I have narrow hips and I have narrow shoulders, and my back width just, it's not going to happen. My body doesn't do that. The width doesn't go, it only goes so far. I've added a lot of width already. It's not exactly comfortable for me. What do you suggest I do without me abusing more drugs? And she said, well, maybe it's not the width, but maybe you just need a little more depth in the back, and that'll give the illusion of the width. And I said, okay, that I can work with. That I can do, and that sounds feasible. So I went back to the gym, and that off season, that's what I was putting focus into. Except that over as weeks and months went by and I was putting on that size, I realized I didn't want that. That's not, I never wanted a huge back. I've never wanted that for myself. I'm 4'11". I have very thick quads and very big glutes, a very small waist, and a narrow structure. And I did not want an upper body that was going to overpower my lower body. It was too much for my frame and for my comfort level for walking around in life. And I was crying on a regular basis about how much I hated my body. And I remember talking with my coach at the time who had helped me for the 2018 shows. He was like consulting me. We collaborated together on my prep. And I was letting him know, like, I don't like my body. I don't like this. I don't want this. I don't want this mass on my back. And I don't understand how the division ended up this way. Like, why this wasn't the original part of the criteria or the expectations. How did it end up with its more size? And that was the feedback that I was constantly getting. Get bigger, get harder, get leaner, get your hamstrings tighter, get your glutes tighter. I had striations in my glutes. Get your glutes tighter, get your hamstrings tighter, get your back wider, get your back bigger. Um, and and I did, just not at the rate that the other girls were doing around me. So it didn't look the same. And so I remember telling my coach at the time that I said, I don't think I should compete. I don't feel emotionally or mentally healthy for this. And he said, oh no, you're not competing. And that was in 2019. He said, you're not competing this year. You are going to take the year off and figure out what you want. And he said, you don't, and he was never one who was like,
Well, can I just say shout out to that coach then? Because there's some coaches that would just be like, I don't care, you're competing and stuff like that. Like, shout out to him that like he at least was just like, hey, yeah, you got it. Because there have been some stories this year about some coaches that might not have given that answer. So at least I appreciate that at least that coach was willing to be like, yes, absolutely. Then you're taking the year off.
well, here's the key thing. So first of all, I'm not going to allow a coach to tell me what to do. The coach is somebody who provides suggestions and guidance. That's a mentor and a teacher. A coach is not a dictator. I think that there is a huge issue in our industry with how clients view coaches and what they allow coaches to do and what coaches do. So for me, I had coached myself for 7 years. I knew my body. I definitely knew my body better than any coach has ever known my body. So a coach was going to either work with me as an equal and we make decisions together and you listen to my input, or you don't get to be my coach. And now not everybody knows their body that well, but still a coach should not be a dictator. It is not, well, don't ask questions. I told you what to do. If you want to win or you want to do well, then you need to trust me. That's how I've had so many in the past, so many posing clients who have been on various drugs because their coach said, don't ask questions, do what I say, and ended up with issues that took them out of competing, or or affected their health and changed things forever. And um, and even so, even with just cardio, like a coach telling somebody to do 3 hours of cardio. There's guru coaches, like really supposedly top level coaches who are telling competitors to do 3 hours of cardio and going, you have to, if you want it bad enough, you'll do what it takes. And it's like, I mean, where's that coach 10 years down the road when that woman hits menopause early? Or when um, that woman starts to see other issues that stem from extreme dieting and extreme cardio, extreme activity that wasn't.
Or just their heart goes out basically from just even a normal person doing that much cardio. It's there's health risks to that.
Well, it's just not. It doesn't make sense. I mean, in the short term, sure, maybe it's going to work, um, but it's not actually. If a coach has to tell a competitor to do 3 hours of cardio, that coach needs to sit down with the competitor and say, I don't think competing this year is in the cards. And we need to just take a longer time and keep it to where I don't think anybody should be doing more than an hour and a half of cardio a day. And this is coming. I have done 2 hours of cardio a day, and you end up feeling like death warmed over. But what it does is it eats into your sleep. And if you don't get enough sleep, you negatively impact your hormones, you negatively impact your brain function. You're at a higher risk for cancer. You don't recover. When you don't get enough sleep, you cannot build the muscle. Your muscle builds through recovery. You cannot just beat your body into the ground. You cannot allow a coach to provide mandates that beat your body into the ground. And clients need to feel the ability to step up and say, hey, coach, I don't necessarily agree with this. Could we dig into why and see if there's other avenues? Now, this all gets into other issues of a male coach and a female client, and female clients are very much like they don't want to disappoint, they don't want to seem like they're not following instructions, they want to be no, I want to show you I'm a good student, I want you proud of me, I don't want you upset with me, I don't want confrontation, I don't know what I'm not the expert here, you're the expert. But I put it to one of my posing clients this way, that so if you hired a contractor to remodel your kitchen and they were doing something that you didn't think was quite right or didn't follow with what y'all had discussed, would you just let it happen, and would you throw away thousands of dollars and just let them do whatever they're going to do and not question a thing? Oh no, I would ask them. Then why the hell would you not ask your coach, excuse me, why are you having me take this and what is it supposed to do? That's your kitchen. And if you get the wrong granite, you're not going to die from it. But if you continue to follow what your coach is telling you and you don't ask the questions, you don't learn. One day that coach isn't going to be there. You need to know how and why to do things, because you cannot just be so dependent upon this person who's not going to be there for life. And I don't, I think it comes from my teaching background, because as teachers, we don't teach so that you're forever dependent upon me in order to know how to write an essay. I want you to be able to write an essay on your own. And I should be able to advance your writing, not make you dependent upon me so you can write. And one day you're not going to work with me and you're going to go off to college, you're going to go off somewhere else to a different job. So you need to be able to fend for yourself when you're writing. And you use what I've taught you. Coaches should be teachers, not dictators. But in our industry, they end up as dictators. And unfortunately, they are providing grocery lists of drugs, very high regimens of cardio, very depleted diets. And bodybuilding's not healthy. It's just not. And that was something also that I had made a decision that I did not want to worry about my health. I mean, I'll be 49 in a week. And so I last competed 3 years ago. So um, I guess I was 46, 45. I don't know. I guess you reach a point where it's just numbers. But I think in 2019, it was just like, I think also Roxy had died so suddenly. It was just such a, like, it was so out of the blue, didn't know what happened. Her heart just, what we assume is her heart just gave out. Um, and it just, I didn't want that to happen to me. And for what? I'm not making money from bodybuilding. Bodybuilding doesn't pay my bills. It doesn't provide me with health insurance. It doesn't provide me with mental health care. I don't get a stipend to help me if I should have a heart issue or an organ issue, a liver issue, because I'm doing stuff in order to keep up with the Joneses on a pro stage. I don't have any support for the mental health. This is a dysfunctional. It's a dysfunctional hobby. There's no way around it. If you do more than 3 shows and continue going through this, there's some screw or wire that's just got a kink in it for you to do this lifestyle. And I'm saying that as a person who has that dysfunction. And I have done a lot of soul searching, and I realized in the past, I think it was in the last 6 months, that I realized my mom is very critical, very hard on me, very critical. I grew up with that. Nothing I did was good enough.
Do you think that that also plays a factor in your decision in bodybuilding? Because that is a sport, sort of like you're never good enough. Yeah, you're never good enough. You always have to improve.
I was just about to say that I replaced my mother with bodybuilding. Like, bodybuilding is my Jewish mother. It is. Nothing is good enough. Nothing is good enough. And it feeds that comfort zone that is a really, really dysfunctional comfort zone for myself, where I never think I'm good enough. I never feel good enough. So I have chosen something where I'm not good enough. Even fans are like, get bigger, get bigger. And you see it, get leaner. They are so, everybody now, because of social, I think because of social media, and because everybody puts out the pictures of when they're so shredded, and they don't say whether that's a recent photo or not a recent photo. So I think fans are also very skewed. I think fans and competitors are skewed in what actually competitors should look like. And thinking that, um, I see so many posts of competitors posting up something. They're in off season now, and they post up something about how they in deep into their prep files. Oh, I remember looking in the mirror going, "This is horrible. I'm fat, this and that." And they're shredded, veins all over, striations, everything. They're like, "Now I know that I was just like, you know, goggles on. I didn't know." That's not healthy, because that also translates into, if you can't recognize how you look in the mirror for how lean you are, you also can't recognize the changes that are occurring if you're abusing drug cycles. And nobody's going to get through to you either. And that is a danger. And there is something about being in contest prep that you end up with these blinders, and you cannot get out of the zone. And it's just, you get caught up in the crowd of it. And I feel like in 2017 and 2018, that was a little bit of what was happening with me, that I was caught up in that crowd of, well, I, yeah, I don't need to go to the Olympia. That's not why I'm competing, but I could. I should try to do what the judges are asking of me. The other girls look like this. I should try to do this. And it takes stepping away and not being in it at all. I can't even tell you the last bodybuilding show I went to. Well, of course, because, well, no, because bodybuilding went on even with COVID. Um, but I, it has taken to totally stepping away and to be able to evaluate it and go, yeah, it was like I was getting caught up in it. And I could see how somebody might make some decisions to take things that are not really the best because you're caught up in this goal that you think that you want. And what I am have been dealing with and confused about is, so I've competed for almost 20 years, done over 50 shows. And for what? Like right now, that's how I feel. Like, what did I get out of it? Like I spent well over $50,000 over the years. The number of hours, the sacrifice, the everything. What if I had put all of that money and time and energy into something intellectual and something and put it somewhere else? And I didn't know. I didn't know that I would suddenly just be like one day, don't really feel like getting on stage. It wasn't like all of a sudden, ooh, an announcement, I'm retired. It was just this, I really just, ugh. I would see people post things about getting ready for a show, and I'm like, thank goodness it's not me. And just that feeling, and just thinking, well, at some point, this is gonna go. I'll miss it. At some point, I'll miss it. No, I don't miss it at all. I mean, I enjoy doing my posing routine on stage. I miss having a place for that, but I certainly don't need to spend thousands of dollars to go and to do that. And would I like to be a little leaner? Yeah. So maybe don't have as many cheat meals. I mean, I have control over that. Um, but yeah, I just feel like with bodybuilding, like I compare it to being in a relationship with somebody, and you don't realize that it's just kind of slowly dying, this ember, and then all of a sudden you wake up and you look over at the person and you're like, yeah, it's not really there for me anymore, sorry. And you don't quite know when it dissipated, but it just slowly over time definitely dissipated. And um and rather than push myself, I've caught myself going, oh, I could do another show. But I think I catch myself doing that when I feel like I don't know where to go in my life. Like I definitely going through a midlife crisis, and I don't know where I want to go in my life. So the easy thing to do is to compete, because I know how to do that and I can do that well. And competing, doing bodybuilding is very much, it's a control. You have a lot of control and you have no control. So you can measure all your foods, and you can do the certain number of reps, and you can do your cardio, and everything is just um, laid out in this very specific and controlled fashion. Everything measured, everything done, everything followed to a T. Of course, once get to the day of, I mean, your body's going to do what it's going to do. People don't understand that peaking is really hard. And sometimes there's not exactly a science to it. You can put all the scientific measures to it that you want to. At the end of the day, the body's going to do what it's going to do for whatever reason, no matter what you did. And I've had that happen. And um, and you don't have control over these humans that are sitting in front of you, making decisions about your body. And so I I I just um I understood. I made a note about I want to find it.
I was just gonna say, geez, if only you'd taken that 50,000 and invested it in like Bitcoin or something like that, like 10 years ago. Gee.
Um got this. Oh, I just made this note to myself that with bodybuilding, I could pretend I had purpose and importance. And now I'm just flesh. And it's true because there's this thing about ooh bodybuilding. Like there's something about doing bodybuilding that people are like, oh, I could never do that. Wow, that's impressive. Oh my gosh. And it's because it's just it catches the eye and people and there is this when you're getting ready for a show, there's this facade of importance, like, ooh, I'm big, bad, buff, and I can lift weight and I can change my body. I have willpower that others don't have. And you have these moments of it that I actually see it's running through the bodybuilding community. I see it in posts, whether people actually feel this way or not, I don't know, or if it's a cover up for insecurities. But there is this, I see these posts that people equate that because they can build and shape their bodies and chisel their bodies in a certain way, that they're somehow better, stronger, more having a more meaningful existence. Um, they don't allow excuses to get to they sit on a higher pedestal than others. And it's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. You ate some chicken, you declined some cake, you lifted, and you went to the gym daily. And it's great. It's a great feat, but it doesn't make you any better, or any worse than the next person. You just made some different choices. And I'm sure that because of all the choices you put into this bucket, some bucket somewhere else in your life is empty. And somebody else has that bucket full. But the bucket that you have that's full, theirs is empty. And it doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just different. And I think there's a part of me that had to kind of step away from that. And I feel like, well, the bucket that I seem to have had full, which was bodybuilding, I no longer want the bucket and I've put it away. I still want to look a certain way though, for me. So I still go to the gym and I still eat the way pretty much, I have more flexibility. But now I don't know what bucket to fill because I don't want to come to the end of 50 years, another 50 years of my life, and look back and go, I thought I wanted that, but I didn't. And now I regret. Like, I don't regret going to the gym, but there is a part of me, if I'm being totally honest, that I regret competing, ever competing. And maybe I'll get over that. Um, but right now, that is what I'm experiencing of what was it for? What did it do? Like, did it did it do enough for me to warrant the amount of time and sacrifice and me looking around and going, I don't know what I want out of my life now, and I don't. And what's even more so, like I'll see people post on my page that I'm so inspiring and motivating, and I'm like, for what? Like what? Why? Because I shaped my flesh like clay. I mean, I don't feel motivating and I don't feel inspiring, and I shouldn't need to carry bodybuilding on my back forever in order to feel motivating to others. So I yeah, it's like I put so much energy, and again, in bodybuilding, you just know there's things that you just know that you have to do, and so now I just feel like I've compared it to, I think I've said this maybe before in the interview that we did before, but there's that movie with Sandra Bullock and George Clooney, Gravity, and where she's tethered in outer space. She's tethered by a cord, but she's floating, and that's how I feel. Like I feel barely tethered, and I don't I don't know like where to go or what to do. And I feel confused. And it definitely ties in with mental health. And I've been experienced really intense depression. Ironically, my blood work is absolutely perfect and healthy. Um, but I think because I feel like I have squandered a lot in pursuit of something that I don't know. Right now, I don't understand why I squandered so much time for this thing, for this hobby, because that's what it's a job, but it doesn't pay like a job. So it's a hobby. But no other hobby takes the amount of time. It doesn't infiltrate your life. If you do Civil War reenactments, it doesn't like coat your life like an oil spill in the Gulf.
I know some people who it does, but yeah, no, I'm just kidding. But no, yeah.
No, I mean, they
No,
go,
I know.
cross stitch, needlepoint doesn't, even golf. You leave it on the course and go on, but bodybuilding takes over everything. It does. It literally it changes your entire lifestyle. Yes, you can still be social, but you still deal with. I mean, it's um, because you're measuring and weighing out your food, and you have to do the car. I can't even imagine. I can't. I can't imagine being a coach and telling somebody to do 3 hours of cardio plus their weight training, plus the meal prep, plus the muscle recovery, like going to a chiropractor or massage therapist, plus the posing practice. Like, I mean, selfish question: how are you going to pay me? Because you have no time left for your job. But also, I mean, why? Then and during competing, like, definitely in the final years, I did feel like a hamster on a wheel. Like, I just felt like I'm just cardio in the morning, weights and cardio in the evening. I've got to get up, doing cardio at 10 o'clock at night, and I know I'm going to have to get up and do cardio again. So I think there's a point where you just go, I don't like now. I would like to be a little bit leaner, and I know if I did double cardio, that would happen. But I get I go and do weights and I look at the time and I'm like, "No, I'd rather have 7 hours of sleep." Like, that's the healthier choice, and get up and do cardio tomorrow morning, and I'm not on a timetable for when my abs have to show up. I mean, I'd like to have, a nice good six pack on the day that I turn 49, but I don't have a judge standing there telling me whether they showed up well enough or not on my birthday. So I'm in charge of that. And one of the things, I mean, I still have this trying to get used to my body and understanding that I'm not going to look like I did when getting ready for the stage. And then also aging. So again, 50's around the corner. I am aging. My body's aging. So to get used to those changes too, which isn't really talked about in the bodybuilding world either. Um, the all these transitional things are not talked about. So I mean, yeah, I rambled.
No worries. If it makes you feel any better, I'm 27 and I feel like I'm getting old. So if you just want to laugh at me then or whatever and just be like, oh God, I feel like it's going to be just like that Friends episode when they all turn 30. I'm just going to look up to the sky and be like, why me? We made a deal that like I'm never going to. But no, yeah, and I just love how honest and upfront you are about all this because so many more people need to be. And at least on the positive side, though, this whole experience that you've had of just being a bodybuilder, have you just at least ever seen the bright side of just like, hey, I was able to do something that so few people are able to do, and I was able to, because like I've said this a million times before on this podcast, if you can compete in a show or just even be a bodybuilder, you can really do anything in your life just because of that willpower that it takes. Have you at least realized that like, hey, I can really accomplish anything if I want to?
But I guess I just don't see it that way. Um, just because you have willpower in one area doesn't necessarily translate to all areas. So I think that that's a little bit of a, I don't know what term I want to put to it, but I think in saying that's what so few people can do. No, people can do this if they want to, if they choose to. There's things that other people do that takes a lot of willpower that really deserves more respect. Um, to go through 7 or 8 years of med school, that definitely that is a sense of willpower and continuing on a journey that and I just think that there's something about people wanting to turn bodybuilding into, like, I don't know if it's because physiques are shaped like superheroes, so people attribute this superhero like mentality to it, when again, I chose to eat chicken and broccoli and rice or potatoes, and I chose to measure my food, and I chose to say no to cake. I just made some different choices in one area of my life, and you chose to make certain choices in another area of your life. So while you can take some of the things that you learn in bodybuilding and attribute it to other areas, I also see bodybuilding as being on a side of OCD. It does, it can turn into a disorder. Um, it oftentimes we're able to do this because we're filling filling in a void that's been left by something else, or you're trying to compensate for something else that happened. Um, whether it's you've been bullied in your past and you're trying to prove that you're not whatever you were made fun of for, or you're trying to show that, look at me now, type of thing. If, as with me, growing up with utter like over extension of criticism and going into something where you're never good enough. I see winners of Olympias going, and it's going to be even better next year. It doesn't need to be better. You just need to come the same. Because if you keep doing better, then you take the division to a place where it's not supposed to be and it was never intended to be. That is a mentality that where it, and there are judges who do say don't do a thing, bring exactly what you did, and still competitors and coaches feed this too. Nope, we're going to come back better, we can do even better than this. There's not a need to. You have to sit back and go, no, that was good, and it will be good in exactly the same way, and we leave it there. But then people aren't motivated. um so again, I think that, yes, I exhibited willpower, I exhibited control, I did something that others see as motivating and inspiring. um but I also feel that there are a lot of other areas to do those things as well. And um and I also was never one who sat there looking at other competitors going, "Oh, I'm so inspired by that." It was, I like that physique, or I like the shape of those quads, or I think that is impressive, but I just never was one who just looked at other competitors and just went, I'm so motivated. I think it's just, no, we all do the same thing. I'll see people go, oh, she deserves it because she's the hardest worker. No, we all work hard. I didn't cheat on my diet. I didn't skip cardio. I worked just as hard. We all worked hard, especially at the pro level. We all worked hard. This isn't a matter of who deserves it more or less or anything like that. It's just who fit the criteria best for what the judges want on that particular day while they're in a lineup of certain people who look a certain way in that particular moment.
Absolutely. Well, and I want to talk to you too about it. Sort of goes into what you were talking about before, but I mean, you picked a good year to, not be competing though as well, because there has been so much more focus on the extremes that the sport goes to with some of the deaths that have been happening, especially in the women's division where there are some deaths due to diuretics and everything. And like you're talking about, I mean, you talked about it perfectly already, where it's like, yeah, the coaches shouldn't be dictators. But what was your reaction like, sort of as an outsider now, just sort of seeing that happen in the community? And I think it's, the only positive that can really be taken out of it is that, a lot more people who aren't as familiar with the sport sort of realize, the extremes that it goes into, and, how much just really goes on behind the scenes that a lot of people don't understand. But what was your reaction like on the outside, just sort of seeing this happen? What's been going on this last year? Because I know it's not unique to bodybuilding. It's been going on for forever, but it seems like this is the first year that's really gotten a lot more exposure than it might have had in years past.
So, first of all, we don't, without a medical examiner's report or autopsy, we don't know exactly why somebody has passed away. And, but there are things done in bodybuilding that are not things that are not healthy. It's not just diuretics. Clen is not healthy. Um, the diuretics are not healthy. The diet itself is not healthy. Water loading, water depleting, that's not healthy. Um, Messing around with anything that messes around with electrolytes. Um, the gear, the gear done when you get gear and it's not prescribed to you, and you're not getting it where it's under a regulation, um, and you don't really know what you're getting, that's not healthy. Abuse of the gear, no matter where you're getting it from, that's not healthy. So there can be all these different variables that play a role. Am I surprised that there are a lot of deaths occurring in bodybuilding? No. I think we're getting into an era right now where over the next 10 years, we're going to be very shocked by a lot of deaths that are going to happen. I think that is, and partly because there are so many competitors who have started the heavy gear use so young, so young. But what I am irritated by is how many people will not come out and just say, yeah, I used, I made a decision to not use as much. That, here, I just think that there's a lack of openness, and it's more so on the women's side. So, on the women's side of things, the women just are not open. It's a very, very closed subject. There are a few who come out and talk about it, but it's a very closed subject. And there is no way, I think, with how figure has become, I would include figure in this, figure, women's physique, and female bodybuilding. The likelihood of competing successfully as a pro without drug use and without taking a risk in the drug use, I think it's rare to non-existent.
Oh, even bikini as well. I mean, I've had plenty of bikini competitors on who, off the record, they've admitted to taking some of them even more stuff than you would even for a physique competitor, really. So yeah, it is just it's everywhere.
It wouldn't. I blame competitors for it. Some people blame judges. I don't. Judges judge what you put on the stage. Um, the only way, I mean, I've thought about a solution to this, but it would never fly. It's not a good business model, but it's something I do in the classroom. If nobody followed the instructions, do it again. You don't get the grade. And you wouldn't have to do that very many times. Definitely at the pro level, all it would take is one or two pro shows in which a division shows up, that lineup shows up, and the head judge looks and goes, "Yeah, no, y'all didn't follow the instructions. Um, you're all DQ'd. Sorry." It would only take one or two times of doing that, and people would follow the instructions. But the problem with that is that the instructions aren't exactly clear. The criteria is not stated in a quantifiable manner in which it's precise word choice, and we understand without any subjectivity in the word choice of what we need to bring. To talk about bringing a feminine structure to the muscle, define feminine, put that on a spectrum. Like what?
They're talking like 1950s housewife, basically, where it's like, yeah, how are you gonna? Yeah, I don't get that either. It's like feminine, like really. Oh, by doing the hands out when you're doing a bicep or something like that. It's like, oh yeah, that makes it feminine, and so, I just don't get. I just don't
Well,
get some of that stuff.
I understand their talk, but then you assign a particular shape, and you say this division goes off of this type of shape, and you draw the shape, and you say when you look in the mirror, your body needs to match this type of a shape. The level of conditioning. If we see striations in this, which it well, it still is in the women's physique criteria. It still says no glute striations. But here I've gone on stage with glute striations and told I'm not lean enough. So, and others have gone on stage with glute striations and also been told not lean enough. So that is not, there has to be there has to be something, some sort of different set of different method of relaying the criteria in a way that is measurable. So right now it's all subjective, and I think that's one of the things, like for me, I got tired of that. There's no objectivity, none. And it's, I mean, it's a toss. Like if I go into this show and everybody's a little shorter and everybody's doesn't have the crazy swoopy lats, I might have a chance. If everybody kept control of their conditioning, because the judges choose what shows up on stage rather than going, here's the marker. Only one person showed up as that marker, so we're going to take that person and then we're going to go from there. Or the rest of y'all just don't get placed, and only the person who met the marker gets placed. I know you can't do that at the amateur level because there's so many, because everybody's starting out. But at the pro level and the national level, you can. And it's just interesting because the national level will often choose somebody that really does fit more of the criteria. And you know that they're not, once they get into the pro level, now they're going to just skyrocket and get bigger and harder. And so that's the thing, is that bodybuilding divisions they have no real cap, because everybody sees it as that this is something you just always get better. That's always the thing. It's never good enough, and you just are to get better. And I think that that is a mentality that is very exhausting, and feeds into, if you have body image issues, body dysmorphia, eating disorders, a skewed view on yourself or the world around you, then this just feeds into it. So, yeah, that's just my. I, it, here's the thing. So people might not publicly agree with me,
But in
but I
private,
know
they will.
it's worse to do. Like they will. Like you talk to people individually and you have private conversations, and we all feel the same way. But once it's on social media or out there, oh, no, nobody wants to talk about it in this way. And I was thinking about this morning, that just because I'm saying these things, it doesn't mean that I am proud of having turned pro. I mean, I spent 15 years and did 15 national shows, and it was three different divisions that I did before I turned pro. So I fought really hard for that. Did not come easy. Um, and I definitely appreciate it. And yes, I am proud of that achievement. And I am proud of being a pro. I will not compete in another organization. That I have, there's nothing. I'm not competing for anything that has to do with the IFBB. I'm not competing because it's not no longer for me. That the look that is out there right now getting rewarded is not what I want for myself. And more importantly, it is I do not want to do the things that I know I'll have to do in order to achieve that look. And so I'm not going to do it anymore. But you can love something or be proud of something or have a positive experience with something and still critique it. Um, and I think some people are kind of scared to do that, to be able to say, hey, no, I am proud of having achieved this accomplishment, but there are problems. And I know it because I've lived it.
I can say for certain there have been 30 to 40 guests that I've had on where off the record they say exactly what you're saying. So yeah, everybody trust me when even I say it that she is definitely not alone on that. It's just that yeah, it's taboo to talk about on social media and yeah, most people just don't want to and it's something that I think needs to be discussed over, but you know, I'm obviously not going to pressure anyone into doing it or you know, but it's just yeah, it's
When women don't talk about it openly, they don't discuss it, you end up, as women, you hurt the rest of the women. Like, I'm speaking directly, any woman who's watching this and you're a competitor and you don't speak up and you don't talk truthfully and you don't discuss your experience and you aren't open and honest about what road you took in order to do well as a pro, you are also responsible for the women who are trying to look like you and choosing, making choices because they're shooting darts in the dark with a coach who doesn't necessarily have their best interests at heart. And so when you don't speak up, you hurt the rest of us.
100%. Yeah, I totally agree.